Hi everybody, Beige, also known as Ryan from Chairsofting. Today, our video is going to be covering a special topic because of all the current circumstances lately surrounding proposed Bill C-21. For those of you who don't know what Bill C-21 is, we have a video with our statement on it down below in the description, so please be sure to check that out. Today, our guest is going to be a fellow airsofter of mine, a friend, an ex-coworker, and what I would consider a mentor of sorts. I used to start airsoft, like most people, and he really got me into the next level, really taught me how to tech, got me into a lot of training stuff, good stuff in airsoft. This, of course, is none other than my friend, Ziming from Black Blitz Airsoft. He is considered one of the premier voices for airsoft teching in Canada. As well, he has been doing great work pushing against proposed Bill C-21 with media clips, appearances, and a lot of work behind the scenes for Airsoft in Canada, also known as savingairsoft.ca. We will include a link for that down below. It is a great resource for fighting Bill C-21, as well as how to talk to people and how to write a letter to your MP, which is super important. So for those of you who don't know who you are, how would you describe yourself and how you got into airsoft and all that good stuff?
Well, I started playing airsoft in middle school, and then when I was in university, I guess you could say I really didn't like writing papers. So sometimes to procrastinate, I'd take apart my airsoft guns and mess around with them. And then I saw an opening at Toronto Airsoft in 2013. They were hiring a gun tech. I sent an application, and somehow I got the job. So I used to work at Toronto Airsoft as the head gun tech, and then after that I went on to Black Blitz Airsoft, and I do the same thing there.
Actually, Z, I used to work under you when I worked at Black Blitz Airsoft in Waterloo, when Kevin first started the store, back when they were above the Midas.
Yeah.
Those were pretty funny. Those were pretty funny times.
Oh, we were all so clueless. It was a fun time. So back then I was a manager at Black Blitz Airsoft, and then Ryan helped a bit with a bit of tech work. He did mostly sales, and he was our liaison with the University of Waterloo Airsoft Club, which was a little down the street.
Hi guys, if you guys are still around, come on and play when this is all over, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, he basically herded the cats that were the Waterloo Airsoft Club.
Yeah.
But he did get them out to some events, and it was great.
Yeah. We did some training stuff. We did events at Flag Raiders, even at Siege, which was really fun.
Oh yes, I remember that talk about how to survive their first milsim, and they came out to I think it was Risk.
No, Wasp. Op Wasp. Back when Delta ran Op Wasp. I don't think you went to that one.
I don't remember. I think I was there.
Were you?
I think I was at Wasp, and it was really cold.
Yes, because it got to minus 15 at night or something like that at PRZ, and the other team left. And we were waiting in the kitchen for them to attack us, and they never came. And I remember watching all of your guys just wandering around. You guys had all the single monotubes at the time, and I was just like, man, these guys look so cool. And I was freezing my ass off and stuff.
Have you ever been so cold at an airsoft game that you wanted someone to shoot you so you could go to sleep?
Yeah, or feel the adrenaline or something like that. And when it's so dark, you're not sure if your eyes are closed or if it's just dark and you're so tired.
That's a poor person problem.
Well, yes, it is. Okay, on to kind of the meat and potatoes. So, Z, last week we got some pretty rough news regarding potential legislation in Canada.
Oh, yes.
And you've been doing some really great activism for the sport, speaking on CTV Kitchener, doing some interviews with the CBC, from what I recall, and speaking for smaller local papers.
Yeah, it's been pretty busy. I woke up on Tuesday to my friend sending me a video of the Minister of Justice saying that he was going to ban airsoft. So I looked it up, and it was true, and I was just I was upset. I was pretty mad. It was the first time in my life that I was ashamed to live in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's an overreaction, especially because this is for most people this is just a hobby, but for us it's our job.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm a gun owner too. So last year on May 1st,
which was the reckoning.
Yeah, on May 1st last year, I had more than $10,000 of my assets banned. And that made me really mad.
Yes.
But for me, while I don't support a gun ban at all, I can at least empathize with some of the people that are against guns, but the logic of banning toy guns to me is just like, where is this logic? Like, if the people that thought this was a good idea went to the Olympics, they would get gold medals in mental gymnastics every year.
So, Z, that being said, how was it like speaking to the media about this? Because that's something that we're going to do, but we don't necessarily have too much experience with yet. So what would your advice be to not only us, but to other fields, venues, stores, and stuff like that for talking to media?
Well, first off, you have to have a cohesive plan on what you're going to say, what kind of narrative you're going to push. Because remember, when you're talking to media, if they're at your store, if they're interviewing you for like an hour or two, they're going to air about 10 seconds of what you actually say. So you have to be very, very careful with your words and make sure that people aren't able to take your words out of context.
Yeah, that's something that definitely people, I think, need to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that, you know, the media isn't always there to necessarily push something. Sometimes the information that they don't include actually is in your benefit. So one example of this that I actually was talking to a buddy of mine recently, Ken from 007 Airsoft, he just did this video with the CBC just yesterday as of the recording of this video. And some people were complaining that, oh, he didn't show them like the kids playing or like them being like, we teach gun safety and like all that stuff, which is important and it might look good to us, but for a person outside of the community, sometimes teaching kids about guns can not often have good optics, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we have to understand that in order for us to get anything done, we're not trying to convince each other.
Yeah,
so
because we already play.
Stuff that looks good to Ryan or stuff that looks good to me isn't necessarily going to convince like little Jimmy's mom, right?
Yeah.
So when you formulate talking points, you have to formulate talking points that might convince little Jimmy's mom who, you know, takes him out to soccer practice.
Yeah.
In a particular looking mom van.
Yeah.
Right.
One piece of advice I can give to people watching when they're trying to talk to people that aren't airsofters is try to think about a topic that you might be uncomfortable with. I know it's really hard to sometimes. And how you would like to be talked about something like that.
Yeah. So if someone
kind of have to approach it with the same decorum.
So if there's someone that is supporting C-21 or thinks it's a good idea, just remember that you're not going to get anywhere if you just berate them. So you got to be friendly, you got to be approachable, and actually explain the issues.
So Z, you've been playing airsoft for quite a little bit longer than I have. You have a lot of connections to what I would consider the old guard in the community.
Oh yeah.
ASC, all that good stuff. In order for us to get more context about C-21 and its potential impacts on airsoft, I think we need to understand the history of the sport a little bit more. So before we had airsoft as we know today, where we can get pretty much anything, and the U.S. market and our market has a lot of overlap. What was it like in the before
early days?
Yeah, in the BC, you know.
I wasn't involved
BC
in like
21.
I wasn't involved in the true early days, but I could say that, like, you know, back in my day, guns came with batteries and chargers, and then you take them and throw them in the trash.
Nice.
I knocked the garbage can over. I hit the garbage can.
It's not even worth
it.
The garbage can's too good for it.
Back then, it came with like the battery and charger that, like the little trickle wall charger that would kill your battery the first time you used it.
It's basically a fire hazard in your house.
Yeah, it was a fire hazard because it didn't stop charging when the battery was full, right? So back then, airsoft guns were really expensive because they were hard to get in country.
What were the laws kind of surrounding that kind of stuff?
They're kind of similar to what Bill C-21 is trying to be. Mm-hmm. But back then, there was at least some kind of firm interpretation of the law. Mm-hmm. Right? And in 2008, I believe, companies started importing airsoft guns that had clear lower receivers, like this wonderful piece of history right here.
I'll pick up this one because I'm an AK guy.
The good old Velocity Arms XM733 with the tinted lower receiver. Yeah, these were...
So this wasn't considered like a replica firearm, and it wasn't considered a real firearm either because of the tinted lower?
Back then, I wasn't considered a replica firearm, but it was I believe it still was an uncontrolled firearm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these guys, Yeah, I think the first time I got an airsoft was when these guys were coming on the market, and I had my first AG was an SRC, Star Rainbow Company. For those who don't know, typically the clear, or we call these actually CanSoft guns, right?
Yeah, we called them CanSoft.
Yeah, CanSoft, because they had the Canadian kind of legal lower or whatever you want to call it. Man, a lot of these lowers would actually crack, but Velocity Arms had the good ones.
Oh, so the AEG ones weren't the worst. The worst,
the pistol ones.
No. The WE M4s.
The gas ones. Yeah, so you can imagine
so
all that reciprocating force on that clear plastic lower, just smashing it to bits every time you fired.
So for those of you that believe that that plastic real AR-15 lowers are a good idea, they're really not. They don't work in airsoft.
So who are the OEMs of these guns back in the day?
So I don't know who made this AK. I know G&G did stuff. I know SRC did stuff, and
KW did some stuff too, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah.
WE did stuff. They had Tokyo Murray stuff. Now the big mystery was who made the Velocity Arms M4 series.
Guesses in the comments, guys.
Yes, guesses in the comments. I don't actually remember. I think I know it, but everyone thought that they were JG, and they aren't. If you can get it right, well, I don't know. It's not up to me.
We'll figure something out. You get a thumbs up. You get a thumbs up. It's pretty darn obscure, though. It's like finding out what the biggest purchaser of glitter is.
Yeah. If you can guess what my first AEG was, then maybe I'll give you something.
It's actually a really good one.
If you can guess what my first AEG was, I'll give you a hint. It was in 2006.
The clear plastic for the gas guns was really awful. Like, I remember having the old school KJW 1911s, because I was like an airsoft FUD back when I was a kid, and I thought 1911s were the best gun ever. And I remember shooting them, and they would just like crack on the bottom and stuff all the time.
So when I first started as the tech at Toronto Airsoft, we were dealing with the fallout from that. Yeah. We had a full bin of replacement tinted WE lower receivers because of all the clear receivers that broke.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, airsoft retailers typically don't want to sell guns that break easily, because it just means more upfront repair costs for them versus upgrade costs. There's a lot of things.
Retailers aren't out there to get you. Some of them are, but for the most part, they're not.
Most of the big ones are not.
Yeah, anyone that's big is fine.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of CanSoft, where did it go kind of past CanSoft, actually?
So after CanSoft, in 2010, it was ruled that airsoft guns that shoot above 407 feet per second do not meet the definition of a replica firearm, because at 407 feet per second or higher, it is capable of causing, quote, serious bodily harm. In other words, some RCMP guy shot a pig's eyeball and decided that 407 is the FPS, is the threshold to cause permanent damage to a pig's eye. Therefore, it can cause serious bodily harm, and therefore, it is not a replica firearm.
So the pig's eye test, so that's actually the level of quote-unquote science behind.
Yes, they went full demolition range, and they shot a bunch of pig's eyeballs, I think. Or maybe they just took one and shot it from different angles. But I guess airsofters weren't any better back then, because, like, what do airsofters do? I don't know. FPS my gun shoots. All right, you got a Coke can?
When it was 407 FPS, what was the market like at that time? Because that was like when we got rid of all these CanSoft stuff, and we could start importing like the black airsoft guns. Right?
Let me tell you, for the 407 days, they spanned 2 years, but it was 2 years of the Wild West. Basically, what happened was people, like retailers, would contact factories in Asia and be like, "Hey, I want to buy like 500 of these guns. Can you like just put a beefier spring in there for me?"
So they put like an M140 in there.
Yeah, they put like an M140 in there, because you can't. Let's put it this way: if 407 is the minimum FPS, you're not going to aim for 410.
Yeah, you don't want to be close to that threshold.
Like these springs are not that consistent. Mm-hmm. The air seal is not that consistent. If you aim for 410, you're going to have some that shoot 380 and some that shoot 440. So retailers generally aim for around 440 FPS. Like,
this is not legal for any field.
Not legal for any field, and also like half the guns didn't cycle out of the box. I remember when I one of the guns that I bought, I think my VFC that I bought in 2013.
Man, that's when VFC. Oh, I look at the old VFC.
Like 2013, it shot 445 FPS, and then I had a Classic Army M14 that also shot like 460 FPS out of the box.
So what would it do to the gearboxes and stuff at that high velocity
Like,
when gearboxes were not made of the better materials, and we had like we discovered new things about like how airsoft teching works and things like that?
yeah, like
Did they just blow up pretty much if people didn't do any changes?
these
to them?
things, like back then, airsoft guns were already built like jalopies. Like imagine you have a really bad car like a Lada, and all of a sudden you try to beef it up. Like,
I mean, you look at this thing. I can see the plastic bushings through this
you can
clear
see the
body.
nylon bushings.
Yeah.
Like airsoft guns were
They came a long way.
Most guns were barely built to handle 400 FPS back then. So like
Did that cause any problems with customers and stuff like that?
a lot. Most guns that came with batteries wouldn't even work with the battery and charger that it came with. And as a member of the community, like if you knew what was going on, you were like, this is great. This is fantastic. I can get the guns that I want now. Whereas new members of the community are like, airsoft is a scam. It comes with a battery that doesn't work, so you're already forcing me to buy another battery. The charger sucks, so you're forcing me to buy another charger. Now you're forcing me to get a spring change so I can play. You're a bunch of scammers.
So,
But they didn't know
weren't
how much
happy.
trouble we had to go through just to get airsoft guns.
Yeah, people don't really appreciate the people working hard behind the scenes just to
Yep.
get the things to actually grow the community.
Yeah. So in the
Yeah.
early days, like right in 2010 when this happened, at first a lot of airsoft guns really sucked. But then after the first batch, when retailers realized there were tons of issues, retailers started to pre-upgrade their guns. So some of the classic armies that were imported had stronger motors and better pistons, so they wouldn't just blow up.
Mhm.
That VFC over there, behind you.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
This one is from 2012.
Yes,
Yeah,
this is
my personal gun.
This is a VFC receiver set from 2012. It's old. Back then, VFCs came with like neodymium magnet motors out of the box. Like they made some stuff that was better,
Yeah.
just so that it could handle the 450 without breaking.
The GNP Canadian carbine series that had like
Oh, yeah.
full metal rack pistons and stuff.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
those were the GMP DX guns. They
Yeah.
came with neodymium magnet motors. They came with
full metal rack pistons.
yeah, like well no, it wasn't just full metal rack.
Oh, it's
piston.
full metal
It was-
pistons.
the full aluminum piston with like steel teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then their gears would just strip because their gears sucked. But
Yeah.
but
Their motors also are pretty garbage.
yeah, but they had good magnets. You have to admit that.
That's true. What about pistols? How did pistols get in? Because green gas pistols, they were so hard to get to shoot over. I think it was
Back
the CO2,
then-
right? They got
But there were some CO2 pistols.
Cansoft pistols were still selling okay at the time because it was
Yeah.
hard to get pistols in.
Cansoft pistols were still selling okay at the time, because it's hard to get a gas pistol to shoot over 407 FPS.
Mhm.
And then
The barrel
Toronto
extenders?
Airsoft came along
Yes.
and made a deal with KWC to make CO2 pistols that shot like 430. Make CO2 pistols that shot 430 that you couldn't use anywhere. Then everyone got pissed off that you couldn't use them anywhere. And then Frank was like, all right, KWC, can you make us like a valve replacement? So when I was in my early days at Toronto Airsoft, half my work was like, hey, can you change this valve out in KWC so that it would reduce the FPS to like 350 or something like that so people could actually use it.
Damn. Things are just so crazy back then. It's like so much work to just get your gun gameable. I think people even now complain about the spring change, but they don't really realize how far we've come.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember those days. That's when I started getting into it, so I kind of remember that. That was messed up. So Z, now we're kind of in this realm of airsoft where most things are available in the market. The market has expanded a lot, and that's due to this kind of new FPS limit that we have to abide by for imports, right? That 366 to 499. So can you explain that a bit?
So basically, the RCMP decided, let's shoot another pig's eye. So they got another pig's eye.
I guess they have two eyes.
I guess. Maybe this one was like, I mean, it had been sitting around for a while, so maybe it was softer. And they just redetermined that 407 FPS actually isn't the threshold. The actual threshold is 366 FPS.
So let me get this straight. We're in Canada, a Commonwealth country, and we're using an imperial unit to determine a law for firearms by using this essentially like...
Yes,
like,
we need to use a moose eye.
So we're using an imperial unit.
Yes.
So feet instead of meters to determine the law for if this is a real gun or not. with a demolition range tier
Well,
scientific test. That seems a little bit weird to me.
technically it is in meters because the law states 152.4 meters.
Okay, so we're good.
But it's 500 FPS.
I wonder if the scientists
Now-
of the firearms lab are just
Now,
converting it.
contrary to popular belief,
Mhm.
it's not actually 366 to 499. It's actually like 700 something. Because in order for a .2, it also has to exceed 5.7 joules. So in order for 5.7 joules is like 700 something FPS on a .2 gram BB. So it's actually legal to have like a 600 FPS airsoft gun.
So for all the extreme long range airsofters, they're okay.
It's one of those things where it's legal, but I would just avoid it because a lot of people don't know how to read, and that's why like someone at the CBSA doesn't know how to read, and that's why they determined that it was 366 to 500 because like they don't know the difference between and or.
Okay.
So basically, what happens is that with the law, when it's defining something that requires a license, it's 500 FPS and 5.7 joules. Now, when it's determining whether or not it's considered legal, considered a legal airsoft gun, it's always 500 FPS. It has to be below 500 FPS or below 5.7 joules. That's where people get confused.
I think I'm a little confused, but I think I
Okay,
kind of
right,
get it.
right. You are Ryan Tan.
Correct?
To be Ryan Tan,
Mhm.
your first name is Ryan and your last name is Tan.
Correct?
To not be Ryan Tan, your first name is not Ryan or your last name is not Tan. That's the difference between and or.
You could put the math in front of me, and the question marks coming in.
That sound that you just
like, yeah. Put it in. That'd be great. So that's how we're getting all these different guns on the market right now. Is the 366 thing?
Yeah, because if you only needed to shoot above 366, it's very reasonable to make a decent quality airsoft gun that shoots around 380, 390. So most airsoft guns now, they're imported at around 390 FPS. So they usually end up in a 380 to 400 FPS range. And it's pretty easy to do that. Now, the other big thing that it opened up was pistols.
Yes.
Before, it was very difficult to get like a green gas pistol, a propane pistol, to shoot above 407 FPS. 366 FPS, on the other hand, that's attainable. All you really need to do is like get a pistol, and have a longer barrel on it, and then once you get it into Canada, change the barrel back to the original one.
Yeah, so that I guess opened up the market for airsoft.
Yeah,
to
it
be
made it
what
so
is
that
now.
basically anything that existed in terms of an airsoft gun, there was a way to get it in Canada legally. The main problem for a while was getting Japanese guns in Canada, because in Japan, for it to be legal, it had to shoot under 1 joule, which is 328 FPS. If it shot over 1 joule, it was not legal in Japan.
Yeah.
But that means that anything that's legal in Japan is illegal in Canada. So what they had to do to get like Tokyo Marui pistols, for example, you would have to have a big shipment of pistols from Tokyo Marui, send them to another country, like another country like China or Hong Kong,
Taiwan.
Yeah, wherever. Have someone there change the barrels and then reship to Canada.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, the Japanese market doesn't really care for the international or American market.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why I don't even see Tokyo Marui having an English website.
Tokyo Marui doesn't care.
They make so much money off of like their own market.
In Japan, Tokyo Marui guns are like children's toys.
Yeah.
It's funny how like, grown men here are like, oh my god, I want that Tokyo Marui. In Japan, Tokyo Marui is like a children's toy that runs on duster gas.
Yes, the duster gas. We run them on green gas here.
Yeah. But yeah, so 366 FPS. This was in 2012 when the RCMP had that memo, and it changed airsoft in Canada, and
for the better. For the better.
Yeah, that was when airsoft started to explode in Canada, and it's pretty much a mainstream sport activity. I wouldn't say sport yet, but mainstream activity like paintball now.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of because I played a little bit of paintball at the time, and then when I realized that all these guns were super easy to get, and for me, airsoft did what paintball couldn't really do, the range. And we love you paintball guys out there, but for me, I wanted that kind of milsim, that kind of aspect to it, and airsoft was kind of built around that actually.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a no-brainer, to get into it.
Yeah, paintball is really good if you're doing something like speedball, but when you're doing something in the woods, airsoft is just a lot better.
Yeah, you get that hop up that range. But we love you MagFed guys out there, and we know you guys are definitely in the same fight as us. And
some paintball guns are going to be affected by this ban.
Yeah, and it's not just airsoft. There's a lot of things that are affected by this ban. Paintball, airgun shooters, maybe.
There are a lot of reasons why Bill C-21 is just a bad return on investment for public safety.
Yeah. So it seems like things have changed a lot in the history of airsoft to actually get to where we are now, and I think that's really important for a lot of people to recognize is how much the industry kind of had to go through in the last decade, really, to kind of explode and all that stuff. So here at Siege, we can even see that with our player base growing. We started in 2015, I believe. So this wouldn't have been possible back then, really. Like when it was the FPS was super high and everything like that.
It would have been really, really difficult. Back then, you basically only played at someone's property,
paintball fields,
or paintball field.
Yeah. Splatters days. Those were fun.
Oh
yeah.
When you touched a wall and you feel like you got 50 different STDs from all the paint.
Yeah. So it's really quite a shame that with all that work that's been done in the industry to get it to be open and inclusive and invite all these people from all these different backgrounds to get into it, that this bill could really be damaging to that. What do you think of all these kinds of changes and all this potential for the damage to our industry?
Where do I start?
I mean, you kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, but yeah.
It's going to destroy airsoft as we know it. Like, a lot of us are straight up just going to shut down. I know if this passes, I straight up am not going to be involved in the airsoft industry anymore. There's no point. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, because the money to even get all these things made for whatever restrictions they have. I mean, that's the problem itself, is like, what does that restriction even mean? Like, what does resembles or whatever language they're using
one of the biggest problems in airsoft with Bill C-21 as it pertains to airsoft is that there's no definition of resemble with near precision. That's left open to interpretation by the RCMP. It's very underhanded. What they're doing is intentionally making it vague so that they can come back and change the law without actually having to change the law. They just need to change the interpretation.
Right.
And then for literally no reason, arbitrary reasons, they can decide, we're going to change it, and your product is now illegal. You can't sell it. And this is something that has happened a lot with the real gun industry. So, for example, the Swiss Arms rifle, which is the Swiss Arms civilian variant of the SG550 series, the CT Auto Sniper in Counter-Strike.
Super cool gun.
Oh, yes.
Super cool gun.
But the G3 was better in Counter-Strike. But anyway, the SG550 series of rifles, the RCMP one day was like, we know it's not a full auto rifle, but even though we told you that it's fine and it's not convertible to full auto, we're going to say right now that it's convertible to full auto. And then they decided that it was a prohibited device.
And outside of Counter-Strike, who sees somebody using a SIG 550 in a crime? Like, holy crap, that's like some payday.
What kind of criminal can afford an SG550?
Yeah. I mean, maybe like it exists in Mexico from those crazy cartels. But
they can even afford G36s.
Well, they got their own militias there, basically.
But yeah, they determined that it was convertible to full automatic. There's another case actually, an airsoft lower receiver that because there's no definition of
before we get into that, Z. So this is going to tackle actually something that's really important, is that there's some people in the government right now saying that these things are easily convertible to firearms, and this is going to tackle that.
Okay.
Yes.
So straight up, if you think that these are convertible to firearms, you're deluded. I'd like to see any politician that says that these are convertible to shooting real bullets try to shoot one without blowing his face up. These, like, the dimensions are nowhere near the same. The metallurgy is nowhere near the same. Mm-hmm. I only know of one or two examples of something where it might actually be convertible to get like a shot off. But like one of these examples is the old version of the TMP226. some RCMP guy decided that it would be a really good idea to mod the frame like crazy and fit like plus power springs everywhere, and then put a real 226 slide on, and then he was able to get one round off before I'm presuming the whole thing exploded.
And we're not talking about some basement garage firearms.
This is the chief firearms scientist of the RCMP.
With
doing
all
demolition
of the machine equipment.
But remember, this is like the chief firearms scientist that did Demolition Ranch with a pig's eyeball.
And the other example is the other example one in the community.
The other example is the RA Tech forged lower receiver for WA gas blowback. So the RCMP chief firearms scientist determined that with this block of metal, in 6.5 hours, it is possible to convert it to a fully functional select fire lower receiver for an M4 M16. AR-15s are semi-auto for M4 M16. Yeah. So while he's not wrong, it took him 6.5 hours. And this is the chief firearms scientist. Like, this is a very experienced machinist in a full machine shop. How is Joe Blow or Boogaloo Bill going to convert this airsoft receiver with his hand drill in his basement? It's not going to happen. So, like, it took him 6.5 hours to do that.
Because it's not just removing materials, adding material too, right?
Yeah, he had to like weld on extra material so that he could re-mill it off in order for it to work, because the dimensions are just completely wrong, right? So for example, it takes Colt Canada 30 minutes to make a fully functioning C7 lower receiver out of a raw forging. 30 minutes. It's literally faster to buy a $20 raw forging off of eBay. And yes, you can get a raw forging off of eBay. It's literally like a piece of aluminum that sort of resembles like a receiver, but has none of the work done to it. So like, it takes Colt Canada 30 minutes to machine out of that. Why would anyone start with an airsoft receiver that costs way more and is hard to import when you can literally just buy a raw forging off of eBay?
I don't even think the RA Tech receiver exists anymore, does it?
I think it still exists, but you can't get it in Canada. But like, why would anyone do that when you can just buy a block of aluminum? By that logic, like, a block of aluminum should be considered a prohibited
because it's
device.
easily convertible.
It's easily convertible.
Yeah. And if you obviously looked inside any AEG or any spring gun before, it resembles a firearm, but mechanically it's more like an RC car. Okay. So for those of you guys going back onto the whole CBSA RCMP reclassifying stuff, that's actually kind of already happening. I mean, not so much reclassifying stuff, but the stuff that gets in the border, from my knowledge, is already getting stopped, getting seized, things like that for airsoft stores. I've been hearing reports about that.
The CBSA has been up to some funny stuff for a couple of months now.
Yeah, and I've been hearing stories from that from various retailers. So that's why a lot of stuff isn't coming back in stock.
One of the reasons.
Yeah, one of the reasons.
The other being COVID manufacturing.
Yeah, so it's just a whole storm of different reasons. Yeah. Ever since the OIC, really, that really slowed things down a lot.
Yeah. There's been a lot of very underhanded stuff going on. And
I'm not going to get into it too much, but there's a lot of stuff going on. For example, a popular airsoft store that I know of had its shipment of G&Ps delayed like 7 years, and then they just got it in.
Well, I think that's just CBSA being incompetent. I don't think that's OIC related.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying is that how can we trust these people to...
How can you trust them to know their own laws?
Exactly.
Yeah, Black Blitz Airsoft had biodegradable BBs seized as prohibited firearms cartridges. One argument that that a lot of supporters of this bill are gonna say is like, well, why don't you just make something that, doesn't resemble with near precision? Okay, we would if you defined it.
Yes.
Because if you don't define it, then we can just make something, and then the RCMP can be like, we don't like that.
And from a business standpoint, like from an end user standpoint, you can be like, ooh, why not this, why not that? But from a business standpoint, that's a lot of liability and a lot of stuff that you can be sitting on if for some reason the RCMP or the whatever agencies involved decide to reclassify.
First of all, it's going to be kind of difficult to get a company to make a specific line of airsoft guns that's, again, Canadian legal. It took a lot of work for these guys to make these in the first place, right? I believe it took 10 years from the Firearms Act in 1998 until these were made in 2008. So it took a lot of time. It took a lot of money. Imagine you sank $1 million into a production line for a Canadian legal airsoft gun. And then the RCMP approved it, and then you bring them in, and you've already dumped $1 million on this. You have all this product.
All the tooling.
And then the RCMP is just like, we're going to change the rules on you and make your thing illegal. Because of that, the risk of that happening, I don't foresee anyone dumping a ton of money on this stuff, because it's happened before in airsoft. Like, people that initially brought in the Cansoft guns like these with the tinted lowers,
they invested a lot of money into
They invested a lot of money into them. They were really good when they first came out. And then the RCMP decided, like, no laws changed. The RCMP changed the interpretation of the laws. And, well, favorably for the community, but extremely unfavorably for people that imported these.
Yeah,
because
your return on investment just turned to zero, because why would anybody buy a tinted lower anymore?
Yeah, why would anyone buy a gun with a tinted lower when you can spend like $50 or $100 more and get this?
Yeah.
Like full black.
With trades and everything
Yeah,
like that.
like, so why would people do that? So it made it basically, the smart retailers back then were like, all right, I got to get rid of this ASAP. Whereas other retailers, some of them sat on this inventory for like half a decade. I bet.
Well, I mean, look at this. This is still here.
I bet every retailer that had the Cansoft guns still has a couple in the back that they haven't been able to clear out.
I mean,
it's just not, there's precedent. And for another example is with the OIC that happened last year that banned a lot of real guns.
So
there was never been a definition of variant.
Mm-hmm.
So things that in the past were interpreted by the RCMP and approved as not an AR-15 variant or something like that. Suddenly they're like, well, there's no definition of variant, so I'm going to call it an AR-15 variant, and you're out of business. It's happened before. Well, it's still happening now. That's why airsoft companies are going to be very, very, very hesitant to invest money. It's just a lot of risk.
It's a lot of risk.
Yeah, it's a lot of risk that where someone else can just like, I'm going to put you out of business for no reason. So with that level of uncertainty, there's no way for airsoft to really continue as it is. Like, I'm involved in the airsoft business, and, we had possible plans of making our own stuff. With this current situation, there's no way we're going to pursue that if this passes, unless there's some kind of definition of it. Mm-hmm. Because, like, it even happens in the States, too. Just a week ago, the Tommy built T-36 receiver, which is an American-made G-36, the ATF approved it, and then last week they're like, actually, it's a machine gun, so it's illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and what would you say to the people that are... I don't want to go to the find a new hobby, because that's like a really dismissive argument, but like the people that say, why do they need to look real and all that stuff? Like, why can't we just buy something that looks like something else or something like that? I mean, for me, that's a pretty obvious answer, because I kind of got into it for this reason.
Airsofters are role players at heart and collectors at heart. Yeah. Like, as much as you want to get away from it, we're all nerds, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are toy guns. You like them because of the way they look.
Yeah. That's the appeal of airsoft. It's honestly, like, I don't think people that say that, they don't understand that airsoft actually wasn't designed with the West in mind.
Airsoft came from Japan, where they have a complete firearms prohibition. Yeah. And they have a rich airsoft culture there. Yeah. So, like, to people that say, well, if you don't have airsoft guns, you don't have blah, 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 well, look at Japan. They have one of the lowest rates of gun crime in the world, and airsoft is everywhere.
And if you want to look at countries that have both firearms and airsoft guns, there's a lot of countries in Europe that
look at the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. They got their stuff together.
Yeah. I say to those people that we can't just get guns that don't look like guns made, because first of all, the biggest appeal of airsoft is that they look real, and that's kind of the selling point. Like, that's basically getting rid of your biggest advertising for getting into the hobby in the first place, to make something for people that might still be in the hobby if they didn't look real.
They just want stuff that, they say that, airsoft is like the gateway to real guns. Well, if you ban airsoft, where do you think all these players are going to go? They're going to go out and buy real guns instead. But, like, if someone wants something that looks like a gun, they're going to they're going to figure out how to get it, whether it's airsoft or a real gun.
Yeah.
All right. If you want to take away the desire for it, then, like, dude, it comes from movies and video games. What are you going to do? Ban movies and video games? Like, it's not a realistic solution.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's no solution to these kinds of things.
If you want to ban gateway guns, like, right, we might as well cut my hands off and like ban sticks. I remember when I was in like grade 1, we played with sticks and we pretended they were guns.
I mean, for example, my mom used to work at a country style coffee shop, for those of you who don't know what that is, and she got robbed, like armed robbery, by a guy that like did this. So like, hey,
with a tube of lipstick?
Who knows? But like, if you're in front of that, right? Like even something like this, right? Pardon my like big shirt boner, but like if you're in front of that and you don't know the context of what's going on, like I think it's the intent of what people want to do with these things more than the things themselves.
People are going to do it regardless.
Yeah, there's really complicated socioeconomic reasons to crime, and I don't really believe that
this doesn't address any of them.
Exactly, it really doesn't.
It's like this. It's like telling a poor person just to stop being poor.
Yeah,
that doesn't address the issue.
It doesn't really fix any of the social reasons or the kind of the sociological reasons for these kinds of things, the socioeconomic reasons. And I think a really great comparison to bring up is homelessness. And some people see it as a quote unquote problem, but they don't realize it's a result of something. It's a result of the systems that exist. And this would be like what cities have been doing for a long time, which is basically designing things in cities. Like if you go to a city like Toronto, for example, you'll see the planters and stuff, they have like spikes on them or like chairs and stuff like that. It's preventing them from sleeping.
It's something that there's a term for this.
Yeah.
Is it inconvenient? Hostile architecture. Okay.
Yes.
It's called hostile architecture. So when you're like sitting at a bench, they have dividers between the seats. That stuff's not actually to show you where to sit. It's to make it uncomfortable to sleep on.
Yes.
Right? Or like those spikes you see under a bridge. Maybe you already brought that up, but it's so you can't set up a tent there. Yeah. Right? So what it's doing is it's not making homelessness go away. It's just hiding it so you can't see it and making it look like it's gone.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what these laws are designed to do. They don't address the problem at all. They just like, we'll just pretend we're doing something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite complicated, and I think the solution is we can go on all day talking about it, but
there are a multitude of reasons why C-21 is garbage.
Yeah.
It's garbage.
Yeah. So for me, if C-21 were to come to pass and I couldn't own my things anymore or like bring them out because they're considered prohibited devices, I don't even know if I would play anymore, to be honest. And running games and stuff like that, it's hard when the things that I want to run, like the milsims and stuff, and the events that I want to run, they're basically like not even possible to be immersed into it. And yeah, sure, that might seem like a surface level issue, but I think it really just like affects the heart of what makes airsoft. It's really sad.
I think that if we're allowed to, it depends, because there's still a lot of vagueness in what's actually going to happen. This is also just like the first draft, the first reading, so there are probably plenty of changes that are going to happen, but right now, it's not even clear if we can play with the guns that we have, because the law that it's written, the way it's written right now, it says that like it'll be prohibited device. Prohibited devices require registration paperwork. There's no way that the government is going to give you a piece of registration paperwork for your airsoft gun.
Yeah, because when you get a prohibited device, license, so like you can now get something crazy, right?
No, it's not going to work like that.
No,
it's like how I'm going to have a prohibited license at some point because of, my guns that were reclassified as prohibited, but it doesn't allow you to acquire new ones. So,
right. So it's basically saying this is yours. You can't do anything with it still.
There are different classes of prohibited licenses, and it's really confusing. It's really confusing.
This is what you get for living in a Commonwealth country.
This is what happens when you have people that have no idea what they're doing making your laws. So like people with the prohibited handgun licenses, they can buy and sell prohibited handguns with each other. But people that have like prohibited AKs, you can't buy another AK.
Oh, I wish.
You can't transfer them.
I wish.
But like right now, the law as it's written, it says that any peace officer, which would include police officers, they can, if they see that you have an airsoft gun, they can ask you for the paperwork for it. And if you can't provide that paperwork, they can confiscate it. So like, theoretically, the cops could just show up and just chill at Siege and wait for people to show up and then take everyone's gun. The way it's written right now, that's what they could do. And if I can't play with my guns as they are, I probably won't play Airsoft. That's not to say I wouldn't have fun playing with one of these, but like those people that know me, my favorite time is when you can't even see your gun anyway. I play at night.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. In order for me to be happy playing with one of these, I'd have to get a new gun, and I'd probably end up spending like over $1,000 upgrading it. It's going to end up being like $1,500, $2,000 for a gun that I don't like.
Yeah, and you might not even sure if it's made as well.
Well, my main thing is that like I don't want to have to spend this much money on something I don't like for a sport that's on its way out. It's sort of like it's like making aftermarket products for a discontinued product.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that are dedicated enough to do it, but it generally just kills the community.
It's not going to be a good return on investment, and it's just like it's putting your hopes into something that's on its way out. That's dying. Yeah. If it passes, at least. It's not a good look.
Damn, that's a lot to digest. So, a really common question that a lot of our audience, and I'm sure you see people on social media asking, is what's going to happen to Airsoft? Like if we can have like a rough, like, let's say this passes, for example, worst case scenario, let's say this passes. What is the future of Airsoft? How will we play? Because I don't think it's going to go away. And even like Siege, we're going to try not to go away, but I just don't know to what capacity Airsoft can exist.
So, I think that there are three types of retailers that are going to three courses of action that retailers are going to take.
Mm-hmm.
One, a big group of us are just going to straight up say, "I'm done. There's no future in this industry."
Yeah.
I think that most retailers are going to do that.
Yeah.
Then after that, some retailers are going to be like, "Well, we're going to try and survive," and then they realize, "Well, at least we tried, but it didn't work out." And then you're going to be left with maybe like 2 retailers in Canada.
The big guys.
But again, this really depends on
what they classify as.
Depends on what the interpretation of the law is going to be, right?
Yeah.
If they decide, oh, well, you can just have an orange tip, well,
that actually makes things better for us.
Airsoft will be okay for the most part. But if they decide that,
it can't resemble any make or model of a real firearm. So anything that looks like an M4 or like an AK is banned.
Yeah, so it really depends. Because, they say resemble with near precision. But what does that mean? For example, an Airsoft M4, the receiver is wider than a real M4 receiver. Does that make it not resemble with near precision? Because it's off. It's not precise. The mechanisms are different. So does it no longer resemble with near precision? Mm-hmm. Or like some people are saying, all right, well, why don't you just make it really brightly colored? Well,
you can paint it.
Have you never seen a brightly colored real gun?
There's actually
you can go to the gun store down the street. Well, not down the street from here, but down the street from where I work, and you can buy a pink M&P 9.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a really good. There's an interesting kind of point to that. There was once, I think last year or 2 years ago, there's a TPS seizure, like a big Toronto police seizure of a bunch of guns, and you see the guns that these guys have, and they're not like just black guns. There's like blue, silver, like essentially what look like Speedsoft and race guns that these people are bringing in. So I don't think the color argument is...
Don't forget about the gold AK they found in Iraq.
I mean, I just don't think the color argument, if you really want to interpret it to its extreme level, is going to stop what this law is trying to quote-unquote stop.
There's the law is just...
It's way too broad, And
it's intentionally done that way because they want to be very underhanded about it. So again, the capacity that Airsoft exists really depends on the interpretation of it, but there will be very little development in the Airsoft industry in Canada because of legal uncertainty.
Would something like Speedsoft survive, you think?
I think that Speedsoft itself will be okay because those guns will let's be real. Those ones will probably be okay. But the problem is, I don't know of anyone that gets into Airsoft thinking, wow, I really want to be a Speedsoft.
Not to dig on you, Speedsoft.
Most of the time, Speedsoft players are recruited from the regular crowd. They're like, wow, I kind of like that play style.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So people don't get into Airsoft because they like Speedsoft. Generally, people get into Airsoft and then they branch off. Some people like casual play. Some people like Milsim. Some people like Speedsoft, right? They join and then they branch off.
And if it's all cut off at the casual play, you're basically cutting off the neck essentially the limb.
It's
the head.
cutting off the new blood.
Yeah.
Eventually the speed softers are gonna get old. You're gonna have bad knees from all the sliding, and then your sport's gonna die off too. I'm sorry.
And even speed soft, like I know a lot of you guys like to run high kappas. Those are 2011s. You know.
Yep.
That could get affected by this. I know the SSG-1 is a cool speed soft gun that's just been released, but that uses an AR receiver. Like, what if that's close enough, right? It's like there's no real telling. I don't want to be alarmist, but it's just based on what the government has been doing and the precedence that's been set. There's no real telling how far these laws can be interpreted.
Yeah, and then even if they allow the SSG, they'll be like, what if they're like, well, it's convertible to look like an M4,
which it is because you can take the rail off.
All you have to do is like change the rail and change the stock, right? So like, who knows how they're going to interpret this? So like, most likely, if they base things off of precedent, they'll most likely go back to allowing the tinted receivers. But
that's a best case scenario thing.
That might be a best case scenario thing, but at the same time, who's going to invest that much money into getting tinted guns made again? Because everyone that did it last time got burned. I don't know if anyone's going to try to do it again.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's important for people to remember that these guns are not made here, and they're not made for us in mind. They're made in Asia, and there incidentally just happens to be a market in North America and Canada.
Yeah, it's not that hard to just get these things made. These molds are expensive. Yeah. So like when you think, oh yeah, why don't you just make it this way? Well, first off, no one in Canada really makes them.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get them made, you have to contact the manufacturer and be like, hey, I want 5,000 of them.
It's a very small number. Considering these guys are set up to make hundreds of thousands of these.
Yeah, so like you need to, do you really think that you can sell like 5,000 of each model in Canada with, a sport that's dying and the level of legal uncertainty?
Also,
I personally wouldn't do it. Maybe someone else will, but like it's not a good look.
Yeah, I think the future of airsoft, if this gets passed, you will not see games and you will not see events the way that to the scale how they used to be.
Again, it's the future of airsoft. It really depends on how this law is enforced.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what's likely to happen, what's likely to happen if it passes, it does not look good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is how ridiculous airsoft, like gun laws in Canada, are going to be.
So this here is a I believe, L96. Pretty extreme for someone to use an op in a crime, obviously, but everyone that plays Counter-Strike
wants
what this is. Yeah, and you know what it looks like. Yeah.
This right here is a Cadex CDX-30 in 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a long-range precision target rifle. Bill Blair, if you're watching this, don't get any ideas. I know you are. But this should not be banned.
And it isn't.
It's perfectly legal. It's a target rifle that I shoot once in a while.
Yeah, and people do target shooting with this. However,
this toy is going to be banned. All this,
you can own it.
Don't get any ideas. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's how ridiculous C-21 is. Like, where is the consistency in your logic?
So obviously with this recent news, it really does look like, especially after some comments made by some people in the government and what we've seen, it really does look like that airsoft is actually being targeted. Yeah.
According to the Minister of Justice,
yeah,
he's targeting
airsoft. It's tough, yeah. So a lot of the community is already doing quite a lot, especially you are also working with me behind the scenes on Airsoft in Canada, and with some pretty great guys working on setting up kind of this big database of information that's going on. What would you say is the best course of action right now, and a call to action to all of you guys out there watching and all of our community?
I'd say the most important thing for us to do is educate ourselves and then educate our friends and family. Mm-hmm. And remember to be open to dialogue, because we can sit here all day and complain about how bad Bill C-21 is to each other, but that's not productive. That's not productive. It doesn't matter if one person is outraged. What matters is the number of people that will affect public opinion, because if you have 10 guys, 10 people, one person is super mad about something, 9 people probably don't care. But if half of them think something's okay, and then the other half, if if there are maybe 2 people that are super passionate about something, and then four people that think that it's pretty good, and the rest are just relatively indifferent, they're probably going to side with
I mean, just to fit in, even.
yeah, they're probably going to side with the people that think it's relatively okay, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is, even if Bill C-21 gets shot down, and there is speculation that Bill C-21 was designed to get shot down.
Yeah.
The fact that it even existed in the first place,
it's dangerous.
It means that whoever wrote that bill thought that that's what the public wants. So we need to really change the landscape here, and we need to really make sure that in the future they don't come after us again.
Mm-hmm.
So what we really, really, really need to do is change the perception of airsoft and legitimize it in the mainstream.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. And I think, especially in being in Toronto, which is a really diverse community, it's the biggest city in Canada, we're taking a little bit of flack for this C-21 stuff because people are blaming us for all this stuff. It's to satisfy.
It's not the time. It's not the time to blame people.
It's really not. And you're talking to us here. We're both from the GTA, and we are in the largest indoor airsoft field in Canada right now. We exist in the heart of Scarborough, which historically has been
Bill Blair's riding.
It's Bill Blair's riding. She's just down the street. But historically, we've also faced gun violence in our communities and stuff like that. I have family that is here and in other places in Toronto that faces these kinds of things. And I think about them because I know for them and for people that aren't really into this stuff, I think we take a lot of the comfort around airsoft and the comfort around guns for granted, and we don't really understand that other people who are not used to these things, they can't even walk into a room with a gun.
And you have to remember though that for us, let's be real here, airsoft isn't life or death. Okay, airsoft is something that I really enjoy. It is my livelihood.
Yeah,
it is my life right now. Yeah. But I'm not going to die if they take it away. You have to remember that some people on the other side of this are people that have lost family members.
Yeah,
to tragedies.
We have to remember that the people on the other side are the people that are affected by some form of violence in some form of way, that they felt that this is a necessary way to curb that.
You have to remember that someone that on the other side, a lot of them are just unreasonable people that don't know what they're talking about. But some of the people that may not know anything about guns know that their child died in L'École Polytechnique, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to remember, these people had seriously traumatic experiences, and of course they're probably going to have their conclusions made before any reasoning, but you just have to remember to be empathetic about that, because say you're arguing with someone that, say you're arguing against someone like that. If you're condescending to someone that had that lost a family member to this, you're never gonna look like you won. You know what I mean?
Think about it this way, right? If I was an impartial person sitting in the middle right here, and on one side we had somebody that was pro airsoft and that had a lot of experience in airsoft, and they're getting really angry about their airsoft guns being taken away, which is essentially it's their hobby, really, or maybe it's their livelihood, like us. And you have on the other side somebody who has lost a family member to gun violence, to something like that. How do you frame yourself to not look like you're the asshole?
What if Ryan is here not complaining, but debating with someone about how airsoft should be legal, and here, what if I'm the cop that shot Tamir Rice? Yeah. What if I'm the mother of Tamir Rice? Mm-hmm. The kid that was shot by the police for having a toy gun. Mm-hmm. You have to remember that
this is real.
Yeah, other people on the other side are real.
Yeah, they're real, just like we are. Right?
You just have to remember that when you're having dialogue, you have to be empathetic.
100%.
You can't just be oh, you guys are libtards. As soon as you say a word like libtard
or commie,
you're just like anything else that you said, even if you had legitimate arguments, like their brain already turned off.
Yeah, and I don't blame them either, because you're not doing any good for us.
If you use the word libtard, I also won't listen to you.
Yeah.
And I lost over $10,000 of stuff.
Yeah.
In the band last year, and I'm gonna lose my livelihood if this happens.
If you use the word commie too, I won't listen to you. My dad had to escape from Pol Pot in Cambodia, so it's just ineffective language, guys. It's just ineffective language. Like, we really have to. You have to find some sort of common ground with these people, right? Like, ultimately, hey, if you were the person that had to pull the trigger for a kid holding an airsoft gun or something like that, I can agree with you to say that, hey, maybe there should be a way. We should open the dialogue about trying to prevent this from happening. Not say that happening is an outcome of me liking my hobby, because it's very easy to frame it that way when you're not empathetic towards the other people's side, right? Because they can see it as you like your hobby and your hobby is involved with kids dying, right? Instead of coming for some sort of common ground. And you can use different arguments and different kind of points. I wouldn't say even arguments, different kind of points for different people.
We have to remember that one of the most important things is public perception. And public perception is how, as a member of the gun community, I believe the gun community is sinking their own ship, because they really don't help themselves with that. Like, think about what the average person thinks of the average gun owner. We really don't help, because we really do reinforce that stereotype with the dumb stuff that some people say. Of course, there are very well-spoken members of the gun community, such as prominent members of the CCFR, which I recommend you look at.
Yeah, for sure.
But in general, the gun community is rife with like really dumb conspiracy theories and really extreme
ideology.
Really extreme ideologies, and just like, we have to present ourselves as normal people.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right? What is like the everyday person, like non-airsoft, non-gun people, non-whatever your hobby is into this kind of thing? Think of like an airsoft or a gun owner, and how can we change that instead of digging our heels deeper into that? Because ultimately, I feel like if you dig your heels deeper into it, it isn't about owning the airsoft guns or your guns anymore. It's about your ego. You're just trying to like prove yourself right in the face of the world. You don't realize that you're not separate from the world.
You have to remember that you have to be negotiable.
Exactly.
So, as an example, think of successful political movements that have happened in the past. In the past in Canada, Asian anti-Asian racism has been really bad. It's not that bad now.
I mean,
it's coming back.
It's kind of coming back, but like, what we're trying to say is that like, we used to have discriminatory policies on people that were, I mean, we're obviously Asian here. We used to have discriminatory policies put on us, like the head tax, unfair work, like
Asians were brought into Canada to build a railway and die building a railway while getting paid very, very little.
And there's a lot of civil movements around how we were able to overcome that, and it really proves the resilience of our people. I think.
Just remember that someone doesn't have to fully embrace your ideology in order to support you.
Yeah, I'm not asking for you guys to go out and wear rice hats and make our dim sum lines longer and our food more expensive to support us. For example, in that context.
Yeah. Don't be the reason why the bubble tea store is out of tapioca when I go. All right.
Yeah, or it's $6.99 because they got to compete with Starbucks.
Oh,
but like,
hey, at least Starbucks will be cheaper.
Maybe. But anyways, you got to really look at the greater context of things, and not just like, I'm an airsofter.
But the point is like,
the
point is like, you don't have to fully embrace the ideology
and people
to
won't.
Be a supporter.
And you have to really realize that people won't.
Yeah. Whereas the gun community, part of the reason why the ship sank is, if someone else has a different ideology than them, you're against us.
Yes.
That's it. We got to stop with the infighting.
Yeah, and there's anti-airsoft people or anti-gun people. Let's lump them in the same thing just for convenience sake. Sure. And there's pro-airsoft, pro-gun people, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't know what airsoft is.
Yes.
Let's be real, right? And how do we take those most people? And I don't want to turn them into airsofters, because then we would fill up too fast, and I don't want to run 100 versus 100 games. It's very not great.
Hey, the owners would like that.
The owners would like that, but it's very not great.
Yeah.
It's how to look at that and say, hey, I don't really want you getting to play airsoft, but I want you to look at it and say, just because I play airsoft, I'm not a crazy person.
Yeah, it's like one huge win for airsoft is like I've spent the last couple days talking to reporters nonstop, and I think that pretty much all the reporters that I've talked to have mentioned like, hey, I've played this before, or like, hey,
I want to play this.
My sister's husband plays this, or like whatever. And I was like, oh, and then one of them, I don't remember what the relationship was, but he knew a guy that I built a gun for.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, that's a huge win for us because these people generally they know someone that plays airsoft and they know that they're not crazy.
Yeah.
So we need to maintain that image, and in order to maintain that image, we have to not go out there and say dumb stuff like we will not comply. Like, how can you say I'm a law-abiding gun owner and then use I will not comply in the same sentence?
Yeah,
like,
and I mean, like, how are you can be law-abiding, but can you guys stop pogging over the bolt-action errors that are coming out?
Like,
yeah.
You mean the Vietnam simulators? but it's just like you have to really stop with the dumb ideology, with the dumb conspiracy theories. I saw a guy saying, "Yeah, let's go have a Capitol riot like the U.S. did." Like, you are the reason. Like, when I fight for airsoft, I don't fight for you.
Yep.
So, like, just make sure that you present yourself as an intelligible person.
Don't just start like screaming.
Don't be one of those guys where like every day he shares 4 things on Facebook. 2 of them are anti-vax and 2 of them are like guns.
Yes, and then people say, these gun owners, these airsofters, they look pretty nutty. And then
to say the least.
And then surprise Pikachu face and the Windows like noise like
surprise Pikachu, no one looks at you.
It's like, what? They think I'm crazy? It's like, I get it. There's a lot going on right now, but rationality will get you a long way. For example, there's a lot of guys working really hard. We've had some real sleepless nights behind the scenes trying to gather information because right now is the best time not to be loud. It's actually the best time to do some research.
Yeah. Just think about what you see on the media. If like I've been on the media quite a bit recently, and you need to present yourself as an intelligible person. Because if you're just out there like and you look like you're whining, we're gonna look like a bunch of whiners.
Yeah, and whiners don't win.
You just need to present yourself as an intelligent person.
Yeah. All right, Z. I think that pretty much wraps up what we got to say. That was a lot, but I think we got some really good information and perspectives out there.
Thanks for watching. Stay safe.
Yeah, and we'll see you soon, guys. We're going to fight this, and we've been fighting this really hard. We're going to win, guys.
Yeah, let's save our sport.
Yeah, let's save our sport.